Hello everyone, my name is Barbara and I would like to welcome you all to our latest Novedge webinar episode. This week, RealFlow for Cinema 4D, a great new workflow for fluid simulations. Next Limit's RealFlow team has recently released the new RealFlow for Cinema 4D. This integration allows you now to get the best in fluid simulation directly inside Cinema 4D. In a few moments, RealFlow expert Helge Maus of pixeltrain will demo RealFlow for Cinema 4D, showcasing the exact workflow and all the new features available to users. Helge Maus delivers with this company pixeltrain 3D VFX animation in-house trainings, workshops, and online coaching for the 3D and VFX industry. He enables you to master professional production techniques with the following tools: Cinema 4D, Maya, Houdini FX, Nuke, After Effects, Vitra, Arnold, RealFlow, Substance, Unity 3D, and many more. So he has worked with very popular clients. Check out the list, and I'm sure it's going to be a great presentation. And if you want to find out more about Novedge and RealFlow for Cinema 4D, visit Novedge online. Novedge is one of the largest online stores for design software. And we offer a huge assortment of software solutions that cater to virtually every designer's need. And for more daily software news and limited time promotions, please visit to the Novedge blog and follow us on Facebook, Google+, and Twitter. Coming up next week, a webinar on MAXON Render, the camera parameters. Last but not least, today's webinar is free and is being recorded live. So if you want to rewatch this or any webinar episode in our collection, just head on over to Novedge's YouTube or Vimeo channels. And now, let me pass the screen and the microphone to Helge. And take it away.
Okay, thanks, Barbara, for...
Oh, Helge, I can't hear you.
For the introduction.
Right.
It was me. That's not... Can you hear me now?
I can hear you now. Go on.
Wonderful. Thanks, Barbara, for the introduction. If something goes wrong, please drop a line into the chat line or contact Barbara. I can't see the chat line in the moment, so she will give me your questions later for a Q&A session, and we can talk about your questions then. So if you have a problem, yeah, ask Barbara for it. So I hope everyone sees my screen with Cinema 4D. It's the version 18, so it's something really new. We have a new great plugin, RealFlow for Cinema 4D, and the new version of Cinema 4D, and we hope we can get both softwares work great together. I don't know how your background in RealFlow is. RealFlow is a very specialized tool for making fluid effects in spheres, and RealFlow is a separate package, so that means for you as a 3D artist, visual effects artist, or maybe only a designer, you have to go into a separate package. You have to learn all the tools there, how this software behaves, and you can achieve great results in RealFlow, but the problem was always you have to bring all your data from your 3D application, here in this case Cinema 4D, or in other solutions, over to RealFlow. There you work, you test all your stuff with dummy geometry in most cases, and then you have to deliver back all your stuff, your particles, your meshes from your fluids or alembic, and then you test it in your scene, and suddenly you see it doesn't fit too perfect. You have to go back, and this was a workflow I had to do in commercial productions, and I was used to work like this. Now we have this RealFlow for Cinema 4D plugin, and if I take a look here, you see I have now a new menu item with the RealFlow options. And the first questions many of my trainees ask me, Helge, do I need RealFlow? If I have this great plugin now, is this plugin everything RealFlow has to offer? The fair answer for this is no. It's only a part of RealFlow, but it's an extremely important part for many uses you have in Cinema 4D. RealFlow itself normally delivers you three kind of different simulations. The first simulation you have is particle-based fluids. Something you use for small and mid-sized fluid simulations, like filling a glass, make a splash, doing all this kind of stuff. You normally use particle-driven fluids, and this is something we have now completely or nearly completely in Cinema 4D with this plugin. The second part, which is not yet part of RealFlow for Cinema 4D, but is part of RealFlow, is Hybrido. Hybrido is a technology from NextLimit, which is due to big fluid simulations for flooding a city or making such kind of catastrophic simulations of fluids, and this is in the moment not part of this RealFlow plugin. And the third part normally we have in RealFlow is Carrandi, and Carrandi is a dynamic system with rigid and soft body dynamics, which we have in RealFlow. We also don't have this in this plugin because Cinema 4D offers a whole dynamic system itself, and so we don't have the need too much of Carrandi in Cinema 4D. So we have a full particle fluid system with this plugin. This is the first important thing you have to know. But the great thing is all the caches we write out from RealFlow for Cinema 4D are based on the same particle information. It's RPC for the people who know RealFlow, and we can import these particle streams also into RealFlow if we like, and we can use it in the RealFlow Exchange plugins NextLimit offers. So if you really have the need somewhere out to use this data in a full RealFlow version, it is possible, but you will see in a moment you don't have the need all the time to do this. I will talk a little bit about the other things like meshes and so in a moment. So the first thing I want to show you is how this plugin now integrates into Cinema 4D, and the most important part we had in a question some minutes ago is if you have problems with your plugin in the moment, if you have bought it, take the time and look into the About box you find here, and here you see that we have a version number of 0095 here at the end. This was an update which came some weeks ago, and always make sure that you have the most current version of your plugin, otherwise unexpected results can occur. Okay, but now let us start. Like I said, RealFlow for Cinema 4D is a particle-driven fluid system. So the first thing is we need to know where is the stuff I want to work with. And here NextLimit has done a really nice approach. We can have a scene object here, and if you add a scene object, we are now in the RealFlow for Cinema 4D. A scene brings some folders or groups with it. We have meshes, emitters, fluids, and demons, and everything we add from the RealFlow menus will automatically add to the correct group. That means if I go in here under emitters and say I want to have a circle emitter, you see we get here an emitter object under the emitters group, and from there you can grab your emitter and place it anywhere, and you press play. Wow, we have our first fluid. It's wonderful. But the cool thing about this scene structure is that you don't have to use the structure itself. You're not allowed to delete this structure. The reason for this comes in a moment. This structure delivers parameters. That means all the fluid simulation data are managed here, for example, through the scene node. And in the scene node you have here solver settings, cache settings, and so on. And so you are not allowed to delete this, but you can grab your emitter, drag it out somewhere For example, if you have an animation where you say, okay, I want to have here a moving cube, this cube is animated, and this emitter is a child of the cube so that it is placed under the cube. If you move the cube around, this simulation will do exactly what you as a Cinema 4D artist expect, and it still works to let all the nodes always in the structure. But in my case, it's a good start that you can add something here and you have a nice structure. The structure also comes if you add a RealFlow object here. For example, I want to have another circle emitter, and you see the RealFlow plugin adds everything you need into your structure. Let us look into the other components we have. So you saw we have the scene node, we have emitters. That means we can dog out this menu. These are different kind of emitters where we can get particles. We will take a look into this in a moment. The next things we have in RealFlow are daemons, and like I said, I don't know if you ever have worked with RealFlow, so I have to make a fast introduction what a daemon is. A daemon is a force or something which manipulates particles. If I, for example, have this image play and I make a long timeline so that we can see a little bit the particles. You see the particles are dumb, they particles, but yeah, they will go forever, and this is extremely boring. So what we want to do is now we want to manipulate these particles, and that's the job of the daemons. I think the first daemon you will use maybe in many of your simulations is a gravity daemon. If I add a daemon, you see it comes into the right group, gravity, and now if you press play, you see, okay, now the particles down, and we can have as many daemons as we like in our simulation. Okay, what else do we here? We have here now a fluid object or a domain in the terms which RealFlow uses. There we say we have a domain. Here it's named a fluid, and you see if you have added an emitter, we have a fluid container here, a domain, so we don't need another one in this moment. Here we have a mesher. Particles itself are not visible in the rendering. That means here rendering in Cinema 4D you don't see anything, and now you have to decide how to make them visible. I will talk a little bit later about different approaches how you can render particles, but in most cases if you want to have a fluid, you want to have a fluid mesh which you can shade like water, chocolate or whatever, and that's the job of the mesher. That means if I add now a mesher, you see it's added here, this mesher here now takes the job of meshing out, and these meshes are polygonal. That means I want to point out, because some people say, okay, particles, I can mesh them in other tools or in Cinema 4D itself. What's the advantage of RealFlow for Cinema 4D not using, for example, standard particle system and meter balls? One of the biggest points I see here is the power and the performance. You see, this is an iMac, and I'm screen sharing at the moment, and I'm here capturing also, and all the particles are simulated, and in the same time this mesher here measures this mesh out. That means if I press now play and stop it here in my HUD, around 3,000 particles which are simulated frame by frame, and I have here an extremely big mesh which is made. So the Next Limit guys has done a great job. The particle system you get in Cinema 4D as a RealFlow incarnation is Dyverso, and Dyverso was new in the last version of RealFlow, and Dyverso is extremely fast and modern structured. We will see some of the stuff in a moment. And the measure we have here is a measure which is based on OpenBDB. It's a very, very known and popular technology, and that's the reason why this measure is so extremely fast, and you get a nearly instant feedback also in complicated situations. So let us finish our round around the components we have. We have here the license. Okay, this is something you need. The help system. If you click here help, your browser opens and you come into an online help. But the very nice thing here is if I have, for example, questions about the measure, you see I find a help button in every of these tabs, and I come directly to the informations I need for this parameter tab. So the online help is really integrated well for learning and working at the same time. So this is the next component. We have here tutorials, and that's it. But something is missing, and so I deactivate my measure for a moment, because now we have a fluid sim, we have forces which are demons here, but we don't have an interaction with another object. And if we add now an object, let us take a sphere here, and we want to have instant interactions, and this sphere we need collision. And the collision is tagged here with a RealFlow tag. It's a collider tag, and if I take a closer look into the collider tag, you see we have many options, but the most important thing is enable collision here. And if I press play now, you see now my particles in components we have in our RealFlow simulation in Cinema 4D, and now we want to take a closer look how these simulations work now. And want to talk a little bit about the structure again. We start here with this scene node. If we go into the scene node, you see here that we have an option box. We have first global options where I can tell the system how many threads I want to render at the same time. It's multi-threaded. That means it's extremely fast and uses all the capabilities of your system. Also, we have a time scale where we can slow down simulations or fasten them up, so we can have cool motion design effects here. And then we have here the solvers. And like I've said, these solvers are Dyverso solvers, and we have 3 different kinds of solvers we see in a moment, and for these solvers we have here the settings. One thing I want to point out here, GPU. This system is extremely fast, like I've said, but this system runs on my CPU. That means I have an Intel i7 processor here, and it's extremely fast. But if you want, you can use here a GPU system. And depending on your operation system, you can have CUDA or OpenCL, and you can decide which device you want to use. And yeah, for me as an Apple user, this Radeon here is not the fastest solution. But if you have a strong GPU system, you can calculate these particle simulations on your GPU, and this will improve the speed of your simulation a lot. The next step we have here is a caching system, and this is something which was new for me as a RealFlow user. I came to Cinema 4D and I thought about, in RealFlow I have to cache first everything. I have to press my A key all over to test and to test and to test, and in Cinema 4D it's much more easy. It's more intuitive to work as a motion designer. I go in here and I press play, And in the same time I press play, RealFlow for Cinema 4D caches out all the data, and here you can decide where to cache out. So if you work in a real project, it's a good habit to have your own cache folder where you want to cache out all your informations. And to show you this really fast, I go here onto my desktop and I make here a cache folder for you, and I press open here. And if I like this simulation a lot and I want to use it later, here cache the simulation out, and the simulation itself is then cached as a RPC, a RealFlow particle cache sequence on my hard drive. And if I take a look here into this cache, you see every frame has its cache file, and I can import it in other solutions. You'll see that this here will also work later for meshes. We also can generate in RealFlow for Cinema 4D. Okay. The last tab here is sometimes really important. You see this cluttering of lines. For learning, it's sometimes really nice to see where everything is, but yeah, if it's distracting, you can change the display of this icon here, so I don't need to see where the system now lives in the moment. Okay, so let us take a first look onto the emitter object now, because the emitter emits all our particles we want to use in the system, and we have a whole bunch of emitters in the RealFlow integration in Cinema 4D. You see circle emitters, cylindrical emitters, fill emitters. We see in a moment that you can fill up objects, you can emit from images, and so on. And if you have an emitter in your scene, you see you have here your options you need. The first tab is normally for the size. It depends a little bit. Change here with these widgets, the size interactive. Under emission, we can tell the system how the emission occurs. Is here speed. This is the speed the particles are emitted, but also the switch on and off. If you later animate this and you want to change the emission time, you say, okay, I only want to emit until frame 20. You can go here to 90. Key this 200 centimeters, go one frame farther, and key this to 0. And this is the same thing like emitting and not emitting. And you see in the moment it doesn't work. Yeah, I have done something wrong. Normally you have to switch it here on and off, but yeah, maybe this something which is a little bit different from the RealFlow version, but we can take a look in a moment into it. Also, we can go here and switch it off here, also interactively. But yeah, the reason for this missing is that I was on the scene and I've cached my data, and this is something I don't want to do, so I untick here, use cache, and remove it to make sure that everything works as expected. And if I go here now into the emitter and show you the same stuff again, sorry for this, you see now it works like expected. So we start here the emission, for example, with 20. So we speed this up in one frame, and if we press play, now you see now it works as expected. This again and bring this back off. And now, yeah, you see, like I've said, it's the on and off switch, but you also can stop your simulation here and change the system, what is really nice. And I use this a lot for developing. That means if you have here an emitter, you press play, you want to switch it off later, you can untick this here in Cinema. Yeah, test this again, and you can switch it on and off. You see, it's full interest So back to the emitter, you have here the speed. Instead of speed, you can also use volumes, which generates blobs. It's really nice if you only you make a volume out of this, and if you have a volume, yeah, it then depends how big it is. So it always fills this volume here with particles. To avoid lines in your simulation, we have here also randomness, so that every particle here is not so evenly distributed, so you can have randomness here, side emissions and ratios. If you want to switch here your emitter, you have here full range, but I don't want to go now through all these options because I want to show you a little bit more about special emitters in a moment. Okay, let us take a really fast look to this fluid. I said it's the domain normally in the terms of RealFlow. And you remember I said we have a Dyverso system. If you look here into this domain, you have here under fluid the type of the fluid system, and you have three kinds of fluid system behaviors. The first one is dump. Dump means we don't have fluidity particles. These particles are dump. They don't have pressure, viscosity, and all the stuff normally a fluid has, but these particles are extremely, like a normal particle system which you can work with. If you want to have fluids, you normally use SPH. SPH is a particle system where every particle works like a fluid. That means they tend to have crowds of them, they come together, they stick together, they have surface tension and a viscosity, and you see these are the parameters for this. That means if I press play here, and we can have here an object which is also collider, like for example here a plane, and let us get rid here of the grid, and we also need here a collider for this. We look into this, you see this particle system, and this is coming from the SPH. Something which trainees most of the cases ask if we look into the emitter, where is the amount of particles we generate? There is no amount, we only have speed. Where can I tell a rate or something like that? Because this is a container-based system, we don't have an amount of particles. The particles are depending on the resolution we have in the system. That means here we have a resolution, and the higher the resolution is, the more particles you get, and the more accurate this fluid will be. You see, if I increase now the resolution, this cloud here gets denser and denser, and here on the left side you see I have now about 30,000 particles, and you get a really nice fluidy look in it. And I stop this, and you see there are these tendrils and drops, and this is due to the SPH system we have here in the background. If you think about fluids, we have here the amount of particles, but every fluid has a density. Normally, if you have 1 meter of water in every direction, you have around 1,000 kilogram, and this is meant by the density. And every of these particle amounts will try to have exactly this density. So if you fill up something, you get 1,000 units in 1 meter. And this is something you can change for your simulation if you want to have a water or fluid which has another density. You can play with this, and this is something which you can art direct a lot. Also, we have pressure, and you see the internal and the external pressure of every particle is 1. But you can tell, okay, I want to have the tendency that the particles go away from each other or clump together, and this is something you can do here. Viscosity. The viscosity of 3 is around water. But if you want to do, for example, a high viscosity fluid like chocolate, honey or so, you can increase this and you get another look or a different look of the fluid here. And the last thing we have to know from the terminology is surface tension. That is the tendency to clump together. You know this from photographies of drops of water, that the surface tension sticks the water together. And this is something you can change here. And the SPH system does all this stuff to the particles, and so you get a result here. But if I switch on here my HUD system and I take a look here, we have here somewhere where it's frames per second. I can show you how fast my screen works. And if I go here now and take my settings, for example 5, here, and I press play, viewport gets a little bit slower, around 4 frames at 40. So it's an extremely fast system, but we can be faster. If you don't need the full SPH system, RealFlow Dyverso has a system which is named position-based dynamic. Position-based dynamic is a little bit like if you look at sand. Sand also have the tendency to clump together and have this kind of look, but you see it's extremely much faster, around 20 frames per second, and it still looks like a fluid. And if the look of SPH is not so important for you, you want to have speed because you have 100,000 or 200,000 particles, then you can go to the PBD system. And the reason why this system is so extremely fast lies here in the solver. And we go back to the scene node, and if you remember the solvers, here are the setting of the SPH solvers, and these are really important to understand. The SPH solver has an adaptive system to calculate what a particle does, and sometimes it only have one substep between frames, only one calculation, but sometimes it goes up and up until 300 substeps, and this slows down the simulation. And if you now compare this to a point-based dynamic solver, you see we normally work here with 2 substeps in min and max, and if the substeps really find something, we have here iterations until 20. So you see it's extremely low, the settings, and this is something you have to keep in mind. You have to increase these settings later if you work with high viscosity fluids or extremely fast particles which have the tendency to blow through walls, and so then you have to increase this. But if you can manage it in your creative process with fluids, I try most of the time to use the PBD system. It's extremely fast to test and to play with. Okay, these are some basic knowledge you have to know. I want to show you now a little bit about the emitters, and one really nice emitter we have here in the list is the fill emitter. The fill emitter uses body or geometry which is used to fill up with a fluid, and in this case I have this sphere here now. I make it invisible for a moment and I use this sphere now in this shape, and you see directly we see now this fluid explodes. This here is now filled in the moment I've emitted, and this also has here a collision tag on it, so the particles are not allowed to collide with the object itself, and that's the reason why we have this. And also we have to decide how this collision objects work. This is something we have to do in a moment. But you see, this fill option is extremely cool because you can fill a tank of water, you can fill a glass, and this is a really nice option to get particles without emitting it first, which can take a long time. So you have here the body, you have jittering, so that these particles don't army of particles, so you can change here a little bit the particles. You can have a fill ratio. Like I said, you can use it for fill up a glass or so. You can tell the system, okay, I want to use the sphere, but this time I only want to have it half filled here, and you see it looks like this. And if we go now back to our sphere, add here again a collision tag from RealFlow, but this time I switch here to the options and I tell the system that I want to change here the volume mode to solid outside. You see now the fluid state fills something here up, and then you can go into your simulation, take this sphere and you have extremely cool animation you have for motion graphics or for other kind of artistic purposes, directly really cool animation. So this is the fill option in the emitters. Also you can use textures for this. We come to textures in a moment. So I remove this emitter for a moment and we go to the clean texture emitter, which is named image. And this is a little bit tricky for a Cinema 4D user. So I have to show this step by step for you so that you can understand this. This emitter is a plane. Okay, a texture normally is a 2D thing, so it makes sense to have this. But I want to use now an image for emitting particles. And this image I have to connect here to this slot, but there is no loader you normally know from Cinema 4D. The way of working is that you take a material. It's not important how it looks. I go here into my color channel, and here in the color channel I go into my RealFlow data, and here I load, for example, this text here. And I made it intentionally wrong. I made a white background and a black text, and white means emitting and black means not emitting. There are no grayscales between this. Black and white are the only colors which are interpreted. And I take this texture now, and to assign this texture now to this image emitter, you have to stay in your material editor, take the texture itself and drag it over so that you get a connection to this. And if you now press play here, you see, okay, sphere is still on. I deactivate this. For a moment, you see now that we get all the rest. I can make it clearer. You remember the amount of particles is made here in the resolution. So if you increase the resolution here to 15, for example, and I take the emitter and don't want to use the speed instead of this, I want to use here it's exactly the wrong way. How to change this? A little trick I found in production. If you have here now your texture and you want to change this, it's no problem to add here other shaders for RealFlow for Cinema 4D. So you can go here, for example, to the filter, go into the filter, and in the filter itself you can now, so if you go here, for example, to the curves and go here, for example, to a linear interpolation of this curve, you can invert your image here with the help of a curve. Now it's white to black. I go one step up, and to make a connection, you see RealFlow has dropped this connection because this is not correct anymore. Now I can drop this here in, and now RealFlow really is using the opposite direction like expected these things. And now I've shown you this with an image, but you also can use, if for example, an image sequence from After Effects or animated textures. And so this is really, really cool and gives you great opportunities to emit particles somehow from an image. Let us take a closer look here to the other options. We have a linear emitter, okay. We have an object emitter. That's also extremely awesome. You go in here and you see we have a platonic here. I switch, for example, really fast to X-ray mode, and now we use this platonic here as an emitter. So I make an object emitter, and in the object emitter I have to use my object which is the platonic. And if I switch now back, you see you get the particles in the shape object. We have now speed, randomness, all the stuff we know. We can smooth normals so that you have, if you have a rounded object where you normally use a Fong-Tech, you can use this. And you also can use a texture. So if you have now added a texture on this object itself and you have used here something like a pattern or so, remember it has to be really black and white, otherwise it doesn't work. So take a checkerboard, it's on the object, make it a little bit smaller, and now you can go in here, and one important thing you have to make, you need a UV map for this. So I make a UV here, and then we can go to our emitter and say I want to use this texture here also on the object. And now you see you get a checker. Yeah, it's really, really flexible. Like I've said, RealFlow for Cinema 4D is really easy to use and to learn, and it's fully interactively. Okay, so this is an object emitter. Then we have spline emitters, also an extremely nice feature you can use for motion graphic stuff. For example, if you have a helix here, and we can increase some rounds here of the helix, make it a little bit higher, and tell the system that we want to have a spline emitter at the spline here. And if I now press play, you see we emit in the shape of these helpers. These helpers are from the RealFlow world, control points. You can open this up here, and you can have more control points if you like. You can add them and delete them. You can move them around, and the nice thing here is if I switch on the helpers, you see the vectors which they in the initial state in the directions of these lines, and if you like, you can rotate, for example, emission, scale the vectors out, and also you have here radius and all this, so you really can shape how you want to emit from the splines, and everything you have here is animatable. That means if I now animate here from this off, and then I go in here and change the height or so the particles direct the job you expect them to do. So this was my round through the emitters we have here. The next thing I wanted to show you is a little bit about here the daemons. The first daemon we know here is the gravity, but most of the daemons, if you take a closer look here, have an option which is named bounding. That means if you normally have a gravity, it works everywhere. You see, yeah, everything falls down. and I rotate the emitter for you that you can see this a little bit better. Okay. If you like, you can say, oh, I want to use a box bounding and so on. And now you can play with this box here. You see it's like a fall off in Mograph or so. And yeah, it really only touches particles which are part of this bounding box. And yeah, this is really nice also for shaping particle streams. So we have gravity, which is really clear. Many of the simulations I do are without gravity. Why? Because then you can play with all these other cool demons. An attractor brings particles together to a point. A crown demon we look in a moment. You can have a D-spline demon, which is really popular. If you have a pour of water, you can use the Cinema 4D spline system. For example, I go here and take my pen tool and make here a little spline, because you want that your fluid goes exactly this way later, or approximately, because it has to look a little bit like fluid, and fluid always does a little bit its own thing. So to use this now, select the spline, make a D-spline, connect it. And now the spline gets again these helpers, and if I press now play, you see that this spline and drives them with three forces. One force is the vortex strength. Let us start with the axial strength. This is a speeding, so I can increase or decrease the speed. I say 0.2 every particles is moved in the direction of the spline. The radial strength means how strong are these helpers. That means how to catch them into the system, and if you need more, you remember you can add them here to define more the spline here. You see the vortex strength is for rotations, so to make a cool looking shape here of these. A filter spline. With a filter spline you can sort between domains. This is a concept we have to talk in a moment. Then you have the K demons. K stands for killing. One of the things you have to keep in mind is that every particle always have to be calculated. That means if a particle goes astray in your scene, falls down somewhere, it's still calculated, and it can get rid of particles you are not interested anymore. And these are the K demons. H, for example, means you can have a lifetime here in seconds and say every particles after 2 seconds will die, and we have a little bit variation in it. So they only live for around, and they are removed from the system, and you can make a water or something like that. But you also can have isolated killer, which means if a particle is alone, it's killed, a speed, too fast, too slow, or a volume, which you use in many cases to make a box around your scene, and every particle which is outside your box is killed. And also if you have an emitter which is outside the box, it can't emit anymore. And now you see these particles. Okay, these are the important K volumes. Then we have demons like, for example, magic. Magic is like an attractor on an object. That means if you have a magic here, you add an object to it. It has a force where the particles try to reach and you can have really funny effects in the moment. Why? Because we don't have any collision here, but this is something you can use and reach this object all the time. fields, surface tension, vortex and wind. Okay, these are the most important aspects we have here. Okay, let us talk briefly about how now we can work with the particle simulation you have. For example, I go in here and say I have a really small particle simulation. I want to render this out. How do I do this? Use a measure. That was the first thing. So if you have a measure, which I add here, you have a mesh, you can make a material on it. But sometimes you want really to use particle systems. And the cool thing here is if you select this fluid container, and beside all of this you have here the resolution, we have here the amount of particles, and then we can go here into the particles, and you see we can create thinking particles from this fluid container. That means we have, instead of the normal particles, also here a group of fluid particles. They have the name of the domain, and these thinking particles are now renderable with all the systems you maybe have where you can render thinking particles. One of this is Mograph, for example. You can go in here, take a Mograph cloner. For this I have to decrease the amount of particles a little bit, otherwise it's a little bit dangerous here. I want to have a really low amount of particles in my system. Okay. And now I want to render them. How we do this, we take a Mograph cloner and go here to the object mode. We add here our thinking particles here, and now we can clone on the positions of this particles here in these spheres. This is one way of working through thinking particles. Another way, for example, if you use renderer like Arnold or so, they have a thinking particles renderer. V-Ray has it, Octane has it, and so we can use these kind of render settings here in the system. I see I run a little bit out of time, so I want to show you some more features we have here, which are important for you, and they are showing the collision and the wet map system. You have here, for example, a little simulation, and what I want to show here is where all the particles hit and also what the system sees here in this moment. And for this I made this really easy setup. I throw some particles out here onto this plane, and I want to have this cube, this presentation plane here, colliding with the particles. Okay. Let us remove the thinking particles and increase here the resolution again. So let us spit out a little bit more. We have here something like that. Okay. What I want to show you is if you sometimes have problems that particles go through surfaces, and so you can make this collision object under the display tab visible. That means in the first frame you see exactly what the system sees. If you want to change what the system sees, you can go here under the volume settings of this, and you can change here. For example, I want to change here the cell size. If the cell size is too low, too big in this moment, you maybe don't have enough resolution to show every detail of a surface, so you can change this. Normally, RealFlow makes a good job in finding this. Also, you can tell the system if this object has to be solid inside, which is in our case the case, solid outside, which doesn't work because then only the inside of the object is calculated, or is it a shell? So you can change everything you see here, and you can tick this here for checking this up. Then you can remove this option, and then you see it like this. Okay. Of understanding how the system works. In every of these collision tags, you have the option here to have a wet map. A wet map calculates where on the surface a particle has hit, and you can make this visible if you show an animated preview here, and you can take here a RealFlow wet map shader, which normally shows you the wet map where everything hits. And if you now want to see this wet map, you have to make sure that you have UVs on your surface, and now you see exactly where the particles hit, and it also dissolves to set here if the particle is long time ago, then it is removed. And this is also cached in your system, so you can use it for displacement, for changing masks, for wetness, and so on. Let me finish with the caching system, and then we can have your questions. In the scene node, you remember we had the caching. Everything we have done can be cached here if you tick here cache. So if you have particles, they are RPC sequences. If you have wet maps, they are PNG sequences, which you can use. Every material you add here with a shader like this adds a PNG sequence with the wet map. And every mesh you generate here is also a lambic file, an ABC file, so you can use it also in other circumstances. Okay, this is the introduction to this. I want to have a little bit of time for questions.
Thank you, thank you.
Then we
thank
can
you, Helge.
close this session.
Wonderful. Okay, let's start in order of which the questions appeared. Somebody's asking about the Hybrido plugin. When will it be implemented? Do you know?
I'm not from Next Limit, so I am not allowed to say anything, but on their website I have looked this also up. They said they want to wait for the feedback if there's a need for big scale water simulations, and then they will implement it maybe.
Okay, and what about demons? Are they essentially the same as the effectors in Mograph?
Yes, exactly. They are forces, but not always forces. For example, there are special daemons like filter, where you have things like, for example, you can ask questions. You have more than one container, and all the particles are part of this container. This is a source, and then you can ask a question. For example, what if the age is bigger than this? Then you can sort them into another container, which behaves different. Yes.
All right. Now I'm reading you the next question. I also assigned it to you so you can read it yourself because it might not be clear. The question is from Andre, and he says, if I render MD Mesh from RealFlow, I have much more options with vertex maps. Is there an option like that with the module?
We have some vertex maps in the system, but not all which are in RealFlow. That's correct. So behind the question stands this here. If we mesh something out, we have here channels, and we can have a speed and a velocity channel, which is used here for motion blur, which can be used in the physical render in Arnold and Octane and so on, and which you can use then if you mesh something out, for example, shading or so. But no, we don't have all the channels which are in the full RealFlow version. We only have these which you see here, speed, velocity, and that's it.
All right. Is there a way to control scene scale and the daemon force scale?
Like in the standard options, I haven't found them yet. So you work really in the scene scale you have in Cinema, and you only have here in the solver these global settings here, which are time scale, which is only for the timing, not for the scene scale itself. They depend really on your scene size of Cinema.
Yes, great, thank you. And somebody's asking if there is what is the advantage between this plugin for cinema, specific for cinema plugin, and what you can achieve in the RealFlow standalone version, for instance.
Okay, that was my introduction.
Yeah.
So you don't have Carrandi, and Carrandi has an advantage that it can interact with the fluid in a coupled way, so a two-side way. This is something we only have in RealFlow and Hybrido. These are the most two parts which I think RealFlow is absolutely better. But think about this, if you are more in a creative process, you want to have instant feedback, then this plugin is extremely cool because you see directly with Mograph, with thinking particles, with all the stuff directly you're seeing. Yeah.
And while we're at it, what about the quality of the mesher in comparison with the RealFlow standalone version?
It's the OpenBDB mesher.
Okay.
So it's the same extremely fast mesher, but you have a little bit less options, but it works really, really nice. And like I've said, in the background you get hidden ABC sequences. And these ABCs are really usable for any kind of rendering purposes. So it's really flexible in a pipeline.
Okay. How do you stick particles on objects? And by this, our attendee means just, to stay on object without any motions.
One thing you can do if you really have only a collision stickiness, then you go to the collision tag and here is stickiness, you reduce bounciness, you increase friction and stickiness, and so the particles will stay there. But if you want to have a more intelligent way, then you use the filter and you sort your particles which has collided to another group, another domain. Here it's named fluid. That's the reason why we can add another fluid. Then I name them collided, and there I remove all the forces from them, so they really stick.
Thank you. Okay, now Ricardo asks, I think he's referring to this image that we're seeing. The wet map shows white on the side of the box where no particles hit. Is this actually generated, or are we seeing this layer?
If you've seen here, I said you can only generate a wet map if you have a UV map. And I had a cube, and you know from Cinema 4D, a cube has sides which are laid on each other. So if you have a clean UV map, for example, a plane has a clean UV map, then you only have your white stripes where you really normally use them. Yeah.
Makes sense, makes sense. I also want to remind everyone, because if they want to explore more, the RealFlow, not the plugin, the product, we have a great webinar on RealFlow 2015 that we recorded on July 9th. So if you go on the YouTube channel, search for Novedge and search for, the title is RealFlow 2015 Quality Control Speed. It talks about Dyverso and all the things that Helge mentioned. So you could, combine these two webinars and then compare. All right. So I think that's it. That's it for questions. Thank you so much, Helge. That was wonderful. I can tell you do this, as a, that's great. That's what you do. It's
sorry that the time was so short. We also can have a 2-hour webinar for this. If you have more questions, you can drop them in English also to my email address. I'm a workflow guy, so if you need workflow information, then you can ask me. And maybe we can do it again, Barbara.
Anytime, Helge. Just say the date. Just pick a date. Anytime. Okay, I will take back the screen so I can tell you a little bit more about what's going to happen. Hold on. Let's see. Can you see my screen? All right.
Yes.
So if you want to rewatch this webinar or any other webinar on our webinar list, just go on YouTube and search for Novedge. Same with Vimeo. We have a channel where we post all the recordings, and a lot of people have asked about it. So, and it's going to be up there starting from this afternoon. And thank you all for attending. Thank you, Helge, for a flawless presentation. And for information on the product, RealFlow for Cinema 4D, visit our page on novedge.com, where you can find not only RealFlow for Cinema 4D, but also Cinema 4D. Novedge is the best way to buy design software online. And don't forget, the next week's webinar is about Maxwell Render, the camera parameters. And to watch today's webinar, as I said, just visit YouTube and Vimeo, search for Novedge, and you can have a field day with all our software tutorial. Thanks again for joining us. Looking forward to work with you again, Helge. Bye, everybody.
Bye.